She used to say that sewing was her way of praying. Every stitch was a whisper, every thread a quiet act of hope. For over 50 years, Elena Morales sat behind her aging singer machine, patching together other people's stories. Dresses for weddings, suits for funerals, curtains for newlyweds, tiny onesies for babies who would grow faster than their parents could imagine. Her shop smelled of fabric, lavender oil, and time. Everyone came to Elena believing she could fix what was torn, and for half a century she did. She just never learned how to fix herself. Her husband, Luis, had been the steady hum in her life, like the rhythm of her sewing pedal, constant and comforting. When he passed away 15 years ago, the machine became her heartbeat. The shop stayed open, not for business, but for sanity. She liked to believe that every tear she repaired in cloth somehow kept her from tearing apart inside. Her children, grown and scattered across the country, called less often now. They sent text messages instead of hugs, photos instead of visits. "We'll come soon, Mama," they'd say. But soon became months, then years. Her shop became her sanctuary, a place where the sound of thread through fabric was louder than loneliness. Still, Elena never complained. She was from a generation that believed grief should be carried quietly, like a folded handkerchief in one's pocket. She smiled for everyone who walked in, no matter how heavy her heart felt that morning. She had learned long ago that people don't bring clothes to be repaired. They bring stories, moments, memories. A uniform too small now that a child had grown. A wedding dress yellowed by time, waiting for a daughter to wear it. A blanket with frayed edges that smelled faintly of someone who wasn't coming back. Elena listened more than she spoke, and somehow that was what kept her alive. One grey afternoon, when the rain tapped softly against her window, a teenage girl rushed in. Her pink ballet dress was torn at the waist, her eyes red from crying. "Please," she said, trembling. "It ripped this morning. My recital is tonight. It's my last one before I leave for college." Elena smiled gently and gestured to the chair by the counter. "Sit down, querida. Let's see what we can do." As she examined the tear, she noticed the fabric was delicate, almost too fragile to mend, but her hands had mended hearts more fragile than this. "Some things," she said softly, threading the needle, "look worse before they're made whole again." The girl watched silently as Elena's fingers danced with precision, the rhythmic hum of the machine soothing the air between them. When she finished, the tear was gone, invisible. The girl stood in awe, tears now of relief. "You saved me," she whispered. Elena smiled, touching her hand. "Maybe you saved me too." That night, after closing the shop, Elena sat in her armchair, the rain still whispering outside. She felt lighter somehow, as if something inside her had been quietly stitched back together. While cleaning the next morning, she found a dusty box hidden under the counter. Inside were pieces of fabric, scraps she had collected through the years, bits of silk, linen, lace and cotton, each one holding a story. A sleeve from a bride's gown, the corner of a child's baby blanket, a pocket from Luis's favorite shirt. For a long moment, she just sat there, her fingers tracing the textures of time. Then, almost instinctively, she began to sew. Day after day, she worked on what she started calling the quilt of life. There was no pattern, no plan, just feeling. She stitched from memory, from longing, from gratitude. Each piece represented something: the deep blue of her husband's eyes, the golden yellow of the sun that used to warm their mornings, the soft pink of her daughter's first dress. Sometimes she sewed until her fingers hurt, until the light faded and the radio hummed its final song of the day. But with every stitch, the quiet ache in her chest softened. She realized she had spent her life repairing others, and now, finally, she was repairing herself. When the quilt was finished, she hung it in the front window of her shop, more out of instinct than pride. She didn't expect anyone to notice, but people did. They stopped on the sidewalk, drawn by the explosion of color and warmth behind the glass. Some took photos, others came inside just to look closer. "It's beautiful," they said. "It feels alive." Before long, her little shop wasn't so quiet anymore. People brought not only clothes but stories. Widows asked her to turn their husbands' shirts into keepsake pillows. Mothers came to learn how to sew instead of buying new things. Children sat by her feet, laughing as they threaded strings through cardboard hearts. Elena became something she hadn't been in years, needed. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the floor, a woman entered, holding the hand of a young boy. "You might not remember me," she said shyly. "You made my prom dress 20 years ago." Elena tilted her head, searching her memory, then smiled. "I remember those eyes," she said softly. The woman nodded, eyes shining. "You told me once that anything can be mended if you care enough to try. I never forgot that. I came to thank you." The boy stepped forward and handed Elena a small drawing. A woman sewing a red heart back together. "That's you," he said proudly. Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Maybe it's all of us," she whispered. From that day forward, her shop became more than a business. It became a small haven of healing. People came not just to fix things, but to remember that broken didn't mean worthless. And for the first time in decades, laughter replaced silence, and hope replaced dust. Elena began to wake up every morning with purpose again. She no longer waited for her children's calls. She had found her family in the faces that walked through her door. Months later, her daughter finally visited. She stood in front of the quilt, eyes glistening. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "I had no idea how much you'd done here." Elena smiled, touching her hand. "Sometimes," she said, "we only see what's torn. We forget to look at what's been mended." Her daughter hugged her tightly, and for the first time in years, Elena felt that the space between them had also been stitched back together. That night, after closing, she turned off the lights and sat by the window once more. The city outside was quiet, bathed in amber streetlight. The quilt glowed softly in the window, each square a heartbeat from her past. She could almost hear Luis's voice in the hum of the street. "You did it, mi amor. You fixed everything that mattered." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she was smiling. She realized that mending wasn't about hiding scars, it was about honoring them. The next morning, the bell above the door rang, and one of her students came in, a young woman with ink-stained fingers and a bright smile. She held up a tiny patch of fabric shaped like a heart. "For you," she said, "because you taught me that we're all stitches waiting to belong somewhere." Elena took the heart, pressing it to her chest. "Then I suppose," she said softly, "I'm finally home." Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, painting the street in gold. Inside, the sewing machine began to hum again, not out of duty but joy. And as the sound filled the room, Elena Morales smiled, her hands steady and her heart whole. She had spent her life fixing others, and in the end, one stitch at a time, she had saved herself.